Hello, Gems! Welcome to another episode of Tiaras and Tech. I'm your host, Shelley Benhoff, and today I'm talking to Didi Asikpo, and she is a senior developer advocate at Ambassador Labs. We talked about how to overcome learning struggles, her passion for cloud, native, and Kubernetes, and some solid advice for anyone who's interested in a career in tech. Without further ado, on to the episode. Hey, Didi, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Super excited.
Yes, absolutely. Like I said, I'm a fan, so I'm just like nerding out here that you've accepted my invitation anyway.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, let's just jump right in and have you tell us your tech story.
All right, cool. So my tech story, right? I feel like unlike most people who, well, not most, but I feel like recently we now have like lots of people who have started a career in tech without necessarily studying computer science. Well, that was quite different for me. I actually studied computer science, but I don't necessarily tie getting into tech into computer science. I'm going to tell you why. I mean, in retrospect, you can think about it like, oh, if I didn't study computer science, then maybe I wouldn't have gone for that internship. But I like to tie my my career in tech or getting into tech to that internship. So generally, I studied computer science at Renaissance University in Nigeria. And I mean, most Nigeria, not all, but most Nigerian universities are not very invested in on the practical side of things, right? So they teach you the theoretical bit, you get to read, but you don't really do like lots of practical. And prior to going to college, right, I used to think computer science was easy, right? Like the teacher would come in and explain something. It was so interesting, so fascinating that I could just like press things. But when I went to college, it wasn't like that anymore. It became like a lot more difficult than I had thought it was going to be, right? And I was just basically like reading to pass my exams. The excitement wasn't there. I just had to like, hey, I'm writing exams tomorrow. Then I'll go read for the exams and then pass the exams, right? So there is this thing in your third year where you go to do an internship with the company. So the idea behind that is to get you up to speed of what the world will look like after you graduate. So I went to do an internship in that company, and then I got an opportunity to learn how to develop Android applications with Java. And then it was like amazing and fantastic. I mean, I could actually implement the things I had learned. It wasn't just the theoretical aspects of things anymore. It was actually building something. I remember the first application I built was just like a very basic app, but it could like run on my phone. I could like connect it to my phone, click on the application, and then something popped up. I was like, oh my God, if we could actually do that thing now, it means that maybe someday I'll be able to build the next Facebook or whatever. But that was definitely what sparked the joy of tech for me. And I was like, okay, hey, this stuff is actually interesting, right? And then when I went back to school, a lot of things made more sense. Things that were so difficult began to seem a bit easier. I wouldn't say it became completely easier, but it definitely changed. So going to that internship for me is like the reason why I decided to be in tech, because I think about it, if I had just gone through the normal part of just going to school without finding that excitement, without finding that they would say control or some sort of inspiration during that internship, then maybe, I don't know though, maybe I would have probably switched into a different field or something.
Yeah, you touched on a topic that, I mean, is so important to understand when you're learning things. You know, there are many different ways to learn something, and not everybody acclimates to college and like a strict, yeah. I am just like you. I studied computer science, and
cool.
And yeah, it was a lot of practical stuff. It was really boring. I think that's why a lot of people quit early on, because my freshman year, we had like hundreds in the CS program. By the time we were graduating, there was maybe like a quarter of us left.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
we have a lot
it's
of people
hard.
in computer science as well. I mean, it is, right? I feel like with the number of resources now and like everything, people just generally make tech to seem like a super easy thing, but it's not easy. I mean, it's doable, it's achievable, but it's really not I mean, just like every other thing in life, right? It's not easy. You have to like put in the work to get to the point where you want to be.
Yeah. I think the quote easy part is tutorials and following instructions that are actionable and that work. But then when you get out into the real world, you have to figure out how to like translate the stuff that you learned in the tutorial to whatever you're building.
Exactly, like spot on. I used to have like so much issue with that. I would follow this tutorial, like, okay, I know this stuff, but then when it's time to actually build it out somewhere without actually following a set of instruction, like when it came to the point where I had to like think about what I needed to do, I realized that, it's not as easy as I thought it was when I was watching a tutorial. Yeah, I think it's very important for people to know that, especially folks who are just starting out or want to build a career for themselves. Like, if you know that from the beginning that this is not going to be the easiest thing, then you're already mentally prepared for it. But if you think, hey, it's easy, watch this tutorial, I feel like at some point you'll just be exhausted or feel like you're not good enough. But you actually are. You just had a different perception of it before you started.
Exactly. Yeah. And as a trainer, like I was told early on never to say that something is simple, never to say that something is easy, because there's going to be a student out there who's struggling, and me telling them that it's simple is going to make them feel stupid. So yeah,
that's definitely good advice, to be honest. Just thinking about it now, because if it's easy for you, it does not necessarily mean it would be easy for other people. So using that statement, makes a lot of sense.
And like, of course it's easy for me. I've been doing this for 20 years. That's why I make it look easy. But so you have a very coveted job as a dev advocate, which is, just, I am parallel to that, I suppose. I do content, but on my own, so I don't like
makes
for
sense.
a company or anything. But anyway,
still very dope, actually. Love everyone who's doing stuff for themselves. It's like,
it's
sorry,
hard.
not to cut this short though.
No.
It's like, I honestly have respect for people who go out to like do stuff on their own, entrepreneurs, content creators that are just doing it by themselves, because honestly, it's like, it's not the easiest thing to do, to be honest. It isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. I'm struggling at the moment, but because it's, September, school's in, not a lot of people are, consuming my content, which happens, every year. It's
during summer. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, it's a shame. But so
it's definitely
it's fine. Interrupt me anytime. This is just a chat. It isn't like, planned out topics, even though I did set your topics. But it's casual. Anyway,
all right.
Why did you want to be a dev advocate?
Oh, interesting. So, like I mentioned, right, when I went for that internship during my third year in college, one interesting thing about that place or that company was that it was very invested in developer communities, right? So maybe once every month or per quarter, you'd see people come together to like learn about technologies, teach each other, just trying to like help the local community there get to know about tech, the benefits of being in tech, the opportunities that come from tech. And for me, it was very inspiring for me, because I feel like generally in life, I've always been like the youngest person in like among my peers, right? So like from high school, I was the youngest. In university, I was the youngest. So it just always felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. Maybe I should have stayed like a year longer before going in, right? So in that company, I got to see other young people like myself, maybe relatively older in like it's like a couple of, let's like 2 or 3 years, but then I still classified them as young people, right? So seeing them teach each other, learn from people, just share their knowledge was very inspiring for me. I think it's like one of the reasons why I decided to be in tech as well, and also one of the reasons why I was very invested in communities. And being invested in communities is things like sharing content from writing articles, speaking at events, recording videos. And it pretty much started from there, from seeing other people doing it, learning from other people's work, and then realizing, okay, maybe I have some sort of knowledge that I can share for other people to learn. I know people always think that, oh, I just got into tech, you shouldn't share knowledge. But I always maintain the fact that even if you've been in tech for 1 month, there's someone who has been in tech for 1 day, right? And the knowledge you have as someone who has been in tech for 1 month will be extremely beneficial to that person. And oftentimes, even your knowledge can be beneficial to people who have been in tech for like a really long time, because they've lost touch of that beginner mindset. They've lost touch of how beginners actually think, right? So your information or the knowledge that you have is essential to people and could also be essential to you in the future. So I think the need to like share my knowledge just like I benefited from other people's knowledge was one of the reasons why I decided to delve more into the community. And at the time, I used to do those things for free, write articles, record videos, all of those stuff. So developer advocacy is basically doing all of those things, but now the company is actually paying you to do them. So it was just like a great opportunity for me to continue to pay back, right? Because I know that I benefited from people's articles, people's videos, people's Twitter threads about stuff, right? That I really could understand from the documentation. So being able to do that for other people is like something I hold dear to my heart. So the fact that I can do that and combine it as a full-time job is one of the reasons why I decided to be a developer advocate. And that's generally how the journey has been for me. Just getting inspired by other people doing the same thing, learning from their work, and realizing, okay, I could also do this as well to also help other people and eventually getting a full-time job from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is so important for people to understand that they need to be open to learn from anyone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I've learned what you said about people who are experienced have lost that, you know, the
beginner mindset, yeah,
whimsy and, you know, the excitement, I guess, of,
yep,
you know, figuring something out and it clicks and you're like, yes, I totally get that. Yeah. And it's so important for people to just learn from anyone. Don't ever think that somebody else doesn't have anything to teach you. You don't need to like a person personally either to learn from them.
Plus one. What I need is your knowledge, right? So you can share the knowledge with me. I'm good. I don't need to like or not like you. That's
exactly.
Like the least of my worries.
That's the least of your worries. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. So, how did you, get your job, I guess?
So one of the benefits of being a developer advocate or being someone who is active in the community is that people get to know you for certain things, right? So if you're always talking about technical writing or Kubernetes or Docker, any of those stuff, certain people in the community will know you to be someone who is knowledgeable about the subject matter or someone who is knowledgeable about developer advocacy or speaking with community, right? So, it's actually been like a while since I actually applied for a job myself. And the reason why that happens is because I talk about stuff a lot on like social media, post on my blog. So there are always recruiters out there trying to look up for people to recruit. So for my current role, I actually got, I got, I think, a LinkedIn message from the recruiter and then an email from my current manager, who is the head of developer relations at Ambassador Labs. And I just thought, oh, okay, this is cool. And at the time, I wasn't very familiar with Kubernetes or the cloud native ecosystem. But prior to that moment where I got the email, I've always found it super fascinating and thought to myself, okay, I'd like to check out this ecosystem. I used to be in the web ecosystem, right? And I'm like, I'd like to check out this ecosystem at some point. So it just felt like the right opportunity at the right time because I actually wanted to try out new things, do more than I was at my former job. So I said, yeah, sure, I would like to have the conversation with you, did the interviews with them. And it was literally one of the best experiences I've had in terms of interviewing. I hate interviews. I don't know. There are people who actually love doing them, but me, I don't like to pass through the mental stress of that. I mean, I know that it's important because you have to do those interviews to join certain companies, but this was very interesting, relaxing. It was great to hear the company's vision. It was nice to see plans that they had in terms of like growth for people who worked at the company. And I was just like, okay, this sounded cool. It will give me an opportunity to learn about Kubernetes, to learn about the cloud native ecosystem, Docker, and also continue to do what I love, which is developer advocacy. So yeah, it's been, I think, a year and almost 2 months now since I joined the company. And yeah, it's literally been like one of the best places I've worked in so far. So I think I made a great decision to join them.
That's awesome. Yeah. And you saw my reaction about recruiters reaching out to you. Yeah. Like the one thing that I hate here is that a lot of them text you and I'm like, don't
on your phone?
On my phone. Yeah. And
You're
like
joking.
continue to do so until you either respond like stop contacting me or you block them, which is what I always do.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's really rude.
How do they get your number in the first
That's
place?
what I'm saying. Like it's not like public information. I'm not posting my resume with my personal information. I see people do this all the time and I'm like, please don't post your address and your phone number on Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like most times because they've not really had experience with like updating CVs. I remember what my first CV looked like. I think I definitely had my phone number in there. I had like all of the information you needed, but as you continue to like grow or stay in the ecosystem, you realize that most of these things are actually not necessary. So you begin to like cut it down. Yeah. So I hope that at some point they will definitely remove those information from their CV.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it's not needed anymore. I can't remember the last time I scheduled a job interview over the phone. Like that's done in email. Or on Twitter. Right? I've actually done that too.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, that's dope. That was a weird one.
So like chatting on Twitter or voice recording on Twitter?
Chat, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, okay. It was a turn. I was like, wow, we're really living in a new age now. I just got a job off Twitter.
Like things are changing. Wow, okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, so let's talk about Kubernetes. I am also super into all of that stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I'm a Docker what's it called?
Community
leader. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
Yeah, and I love their community is so like inclusive and amazing and just like welcoming is what they say.
Yeah, welcoming.
The first time I heard that, I was like,
they're
welcome.
Actually.
Yeah. So let's talk about the magic that is all this containerization, Kubernetes.
Yeah.
Why do you specialize in all of that?
Cool. So when I worked there was a company I worked at called InterSwitch, and at the time I just worked in the web development field, right? So we had like the DevOps team, and then there was like the web team and the Android team. So I used to sit down close to one of the DevOps engineers, right? And whenever something went down, like an application went down, you would always see people message that DevOps engineer or like try to speak to him, and like his name is Abdul. So they're like, hey, Abdul, what's going on? And he'll be like, Kubernetes is down, or Kibana is not working, like all of those words. And I was like, okay, this all sounds super interesting. And then you see him in his command line, typing in some commands, and things will get returned. And I'm like, what is all of this? So it just seemed like something very interesting for me. And I mean, since I wasn't in the cloud native space or the DevOps space, I really had no clue what it was, but I had like a vague understanding of what Kubernetes meant or what the DevOps team was expected to do in general. So I just had at the back of my mind that I would love to go more in depth into this thing at some point in my career, right? Because I feel like every human has a point where they just want to try new things. So I was like, whenever I feel like trying something new, then maybe I'll just switch into this field. So I eventually made that switch when I officially joined my current company, right? And I feel like the world is slowly going to a point where everything would have to be on the cloud, right? From moving from a monolithic architectural system to going to microservices, because it has a lot more benefits than monolithic architectures, right? You can easily, I mean, unlike before where people had to like write code for months and then now ship the code, with the microservice architecture now, we're basically saying, hey, you don't need to wait for that long to do that, because doing that will cause things like merge conflict or something called merge hell, where I go to write, so we're like two engineers in a team. I'm expected to write a certain level of code, and the other person is expected to write a certain level of code as well. And in using the monolithic architecture, we take like, let's say, a month or a couple of weeks to write this code. And then we come back and like, hey, let's merge this thing together. Because we've both not seen each other's codes in weeks, we may have deleted something that the other person was working on. And that will now cause something called merge hell, where it's like super hard to like merge up the two code changes that has been made. But the microservice architecture, every single time I make a code change, I can push it to GitHub, for instance, and then the other person also pushes their code to GitHub. So that way we can like reduce merge conflicts. We can get a sense of what the other person is working on. We can also give feedback to those other people quickly. So the microservice and the microservice architecture, and also the plan of moving things to the cloud, helps to resolve some of these issues that existed in the past, right? Of course, there's still like a lot of work to bring in more people into the like a microservice way of thinking, because it's actually super hard to do that, like trying to break down a system from being a monolithic application all the way to microservice architecture. It takes a long period of time. So I feel like we still have a long way to go to eventually achieve that. But then the benefits of microservices, Kubernetes, Docker is a lot, right? It's a lot more beneficial than the previous way of doing things. And I feel like just being part of this right now, that not everybody's here, but we're continuing to like advocate for the benefits of doing these things, is just great, because there's going to be a point where there would most likely not be a monolithic architecture again, a monolithic application anymore. So being one of the people who is like helping to pioneer this is fantastic, because at that point you'd have a lot more knowledge that you can help companies. Maybe you could decide to be a consultant or just do something personal, right? Because you have all of that information. So I just think it's like fascinating. I think it's the future. I believe that at some point all of the applications will now be on the cloud.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think Kubernetes is magic, first of all. Like I have had instances where I had to do a emergency scale up of web servers, and without containers, and Kubernetes is a very manual process. You have to spin up the new server, you have to install all the things and whatever. Mm-hmm. Kubernetes, you say scale and you say a number, and it just makes it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it handles all the networking. It handles like the DNS, the load balancer. I just can't even.
I know, it's too much. If you want to explain or mention the benefits, you probably have to take it on this call like tomorrow. It's just a lot of benefits.
Totally. Yeah. I love it. So next I have a segment that I like to call Precious Gems. This is where I share like a comment or a quote from a person on social media. So I'm going to share my screen here. This one was a comment on Instagram from a quote from an episode where I had a drag queen, and she is amazing. And she was just telling people about, you need to utilize any free or inexpensive resources where you can learn it yourself first. And the comment was, yes, in fact, being resourceful can help us be more self-sufficient. And that was from Deeper Than Tech. So thank you very much for your comment. If you want to be featured on the show, add a comment to our posts on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Twitch.
All of it.
Yeah.
Oh, you have all.
We're on
all
there.
Their accounts.
Yep,
Awesome.
I absolutely read all of them. So, yeah.
Cool.
Let's get back to you and your awesome career. Yeah, let's talk about cloud native. We're already talking about containers and Kubernetes. Cloud native, I guess, is the overall ecosystem.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly
sure.
Yeah,
so it's like a general term for applications built on the cloud, right? So when you say something is on the cloud, it means it's being held somewhere on the cloud. Maybe it could be like a server, right? So cloud native is building applications based off these cloud technologies, right? So if you build an application that is let's say deployed to a Kubernetes cluster, for instance, or is containerized using Docker, then that is a cloud native application because you're building and using cloud technologies. So cloud native is like a a broad term that encompasses these different applications. Just like let's say building mobile applications, right? Where you use like either Android or Java and all of those things. So the building of it with Java is like, okay, you're actually building a native application to that OS, right? So Android on itself is like an operating system, right? Where we can have it running on a phone. But when you are building applications, then it means you're building an Android native application, which is based off Android as itself as an operating system. So cloud native is basically building applications using cloud technologies.
Cool. Yeah. I always need a refresher on stuff like that. There's so many like terminologies.
I know. There's like cloud native, cloud computing delivery model. It's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff that is worth learning. Segue to next question. What are some good learning resources for containers and
so I there are a lot. My company has one as well, so maybe I'll just send you links to those resources. But if you Google,
sure.
We have a Kubernetes learning center where you can learn about Kubernetes, and we also have like a glossary where we explain different concepts in the cloud native space. Then I also love Code Cloud. I think it's a fantastic learning resource. Then there's also this article written by I can't remember his name, but it's an article on Free Code Camp. So what I'll do is I'll share all of these resources with you so that I can maybe link them up in the YouTube or somewhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, cool. So there are awesome resources out there. There's also like Siam. There's Kunal who also share fantastic resources about like DevOps, Cloud Native, and Kubernetes. So I'm going to also send that as well. But they're awesome, and I feel like a quick Google search will give you access to the resources. But to name my favorite, I would say the Kubernetes Learning Center by Ambassador Labs, Code Cloud by Mohammed, and then Kunal's YouTube channel, and then resources on Free Code Camp as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all great resources. I've used a couple of them. Again, like Docker and Kubernetes, the learning curve on that is very steep. Do not feel bad if you don't get it quickly. Like it took me months to just even like, what is a container? What is an image?
Me too. It was intense. Like you would learn and then reach a point where like, oh yeah, now I know this stuff. But you now realize that there's still so much more you need to learn, right? So it's like it gets very overwhelming super quickly. So it's important to realize or just remember that this is like a lot. There are so many concepts, so many things inside of it. So you just need to like take a break and do as much as you can with like the time you have and not feel overwhelmed or put a lot of pressure on yourself.
Exactly. Yes. Excellent advice. So yeah, let's talk about technical writing. This is also another, we have so much in common. Like I love technical writing and you love technical writing. What are some important skills?
For a technical writer?
Yeah, to write.
Someone who wants to become a technical writer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I would say understanding your audience, right? So I've seen different articles where the topic is something that is centered around the beginner, but then the content is written for experts, right? And I feel like knowing who your audience is like one of the key things you need to understand as someone who wants to become a technical writer, right? Because you need to identify, hey, who am I writing for? Am I writing this article for a beginner? Am I writing it for an intermediate person? Or am I writing it for an expert? Because when you ask yourself those questions, it helps you tailor your content to the right audience. So I don't want to see a topic named how to trigger an element in React, for instance, and then the content of that topic is talking about scroll trigger plugin. It doesn't make sense because the topic says it's going to teach me about a football, for instance. I should be able to see the actual football, see the content, talk about the football and not the cup. So understanding your audience helps you to tailor your content to that particular audience. And then I think another thing for me would be researching, because every person who writes does not necessarily know every single thing, right? So you want to be able to give yourself all of the information you need to write reasonable and correct content, right? You don't want to be spreading bad information out there. You don't want to be giving people the wrong impression about a particular technology, a particular concept. You need to be able to carry out all the necessary research you need to fully understand how that technology or that programming language or that concept works before you write an article about it. And then my final skill would be having a unique voice. And by unique voice, I mean keeping true to yourself, right? Because, I mean, it's okay to get inspired by other people's work, to want to write like other people, but it's always essential and very important to still maintain like the way you speak or the way you would generally explain something to someone. And I'm going to give you an example. So this time I wanted to write an article on how to manipulate the DOM with JavaScript. And if you're a web developer, you know that that's a very important topic, right? Meaning that there's been so many contents about it, so many articles, so many videos, so many, like, just name it, that content is a lot on the internet. And then when I was almost done with writing this article, I thought to myself, why are you writing it? Like, why do you want to publish it? There's already 1,001 articles about the same thing. Why are you adding to it? And then I was like, okay, I mean, even if nobody reads it, at some point in the future, I might need to remember something, right? Because our brain doesn't remember every single thing. And then this article could actually help me. And then I wrote the article and then posted it on Twitter. And then to my surprise, the article got like lots of retweets and likes. I think it got like up to 600 and something likes and like over 200 plus retweets. And then you would see people comment on the article that, oh, they've actually been struggling with this thing. But then after reading my article, they now actually understand it. And they now made me realize that even if there's been hundreds of contents about the same thing, there are still people out there who still don't understand it based off those content, because they are looking for a unique style of writing that would speak to them, right? So the way I write something might speak to 50 people, while the way you write something speaks to the other 50 people. So not writing in the way you're supposed to pretty much deprives those 50 people who would have understood what you said of actually understanding it. So get inspired by other people, get the inspiration that you need, but don't forget who you are. Don't forget to use your own words when actually writing technical articles.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And it's important to know that, yeah, there's content out there. Like, there's tons of things that are repeated over and over. When people are scared to publish a topic that, you know, is widely available already. I always tell them, here, our stores, there are so many different types of bread. There are so many different
exactly
brands of bread, cuts of bread, like rolls and hot dog rolls. And so like just walk down the bread aisle and be like, you know what? I have things to say.
Yeah. That's the perfect example, to be honest. Yes, it's bread, but there are different types, and a certain person will like a certain type, while
Exactly.
the other person will prefer the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Spot on.
Spot on. Yeah. So how can we improve the overall dev workflow?
That's an interesting question. I think it generally depends on what the developer is trying to achieve, right? So if you are, let's say, DevOps engineer, for instance, I'll speak to that because I'm now in the cloud native space. So I think that like most organizations adopted cloud native technologies like Kubernetes, for instance, to help them move faster because with Kubernetes, you don't necessarily have to wait for months before you push something to production. You can always push it as soon as it's ready, and then people can like test it. There are even things like, let's say, canary releases, for instance, where you can push your updates to only a certain number of users and then test it. If it's going well with them, then you now ship it out to other users. So even though Kubernetes has like tons of benefits, it also has downsides, like you not being able to quickly like test or see the impact of your code changes. So in a monolithic environment, it was easy to like write something and then you just like build, and then React shows you the results of those code changes. But with the microservice architecture now, where you're working with Kubernetes, it's not that easy anymore because there are so many services. Most often than not, the actual service you're working is already in production. So you don't want to do something that would temper or affect the service in production. So trying to improve your workflow in this kind of architecture would mean having certain, like let's say, tools and services that makes these things easier. For instance, a CI environment that would help you automatically deploy things. Let's say GitHub Actions, Circle CI, those kind of tools that help you make deploying a lot easier. So another of my favorites is a tool called Telepresence, which is a CNCF tool, which basically allows you to quickly see the impact of your code changes. So instead of making a code change, building it, pushing it to Docker, then deploying it into the production environment or testing environment before seeing the impact of your code changes, you can literally just see when you are developing those changes. So it gives you the same feeling you would have gotten in a monolithic architecture, but you're still getting the benefits of a microservice architecture. So you're using Kubernetes, you're using all of the awesome things that Kubernetes provides for you, but then you're still getting that fast feedback loop. You don't have to wait for minutes or hours to see the impact of your code changes. You can get them as soon as possible. And I feel like, to summarize, I would say in order to improve the developer workflow, it's identifying certain things that you can do to make it better. So are you struggling with deploying? Then maybe we should try like GitHub Actions or try another tool that helps make deploying a lot easier, a lot more automated. Are you having a slow feedback loop? Then maybe try a tool like Telepresence, right? Are you trying to do something more specific? Then a quick Google search will give you certain tools that could handle those things. Because I feel like people are generally building tools centered around specific things these days. Like someone has a problem with this and they're like, oh, hey, I should build a tool for that. And before you know, it becomes a startup and they're raising money. So there's literally almost a tool for everything nowadays in the cloud native ecosystem.
Yeah, that's amazing. I hadn't heard of that before. I will definitely check that out. Anything to automate manual processes and make our lives easier, because I've been through deployments to production that took like 14 hours before.
Wow. Yeah.
And you wonder like what could have possibly gone wrong. Everything went wrong.
I know. It can be crazy most of the time.
Like,
but
seriously.
Yeah, there are definitely tools out there to make it easier.
Yeah, absolutely. So what advice do you have for anyone who is interested in a career in tech?
My advice would just be to start, right? I feel like a lot of people think about it. They're like, oh, hey, should I start? Maybe I'm not really good at it. What exactly should I do? All you just need to do is actually start. Like that's the way you learn about things. It's like writing, for instance. There is this quote that says, you only learn how to write by writing. And I've just pretty much applied that in every other part of my life. You only learn how to code by coding. You only learn how to exercise by exercise. You only learn how to read by reading. It's like whatever thing you're trying to do in life, you only learn how to do those things by actually doing those things, because doing them gives you like a lot more practical experience, gives you an opportunity to decide that you do not want to do this anymore, or you want to transition into a different field, right? Like an instance would be people saying, oh, hey, should I be a front-end developer or should I be a back-end developer? You won't really know except you actually try doing one and then realize that, okay, I don't think I'm really doing well here. I don't think this is really for me. Then you go to try the second one and then you now realize, okay, hey, maybe the first one was better. So by actually starting, you give yourself an opportunity to see how it would actually feel like, instead of just making assumptions. So my advice for like every person who wants to get started in tech is to start. You start and then you figure it out from there. It's absolutely okay to start as a web developer and then transition and say you want to become a technical writer, or that you want to become a DevOps engineer. It's absolutely fine. But you can't make these transitions if you don't actually start.
Absolutely. That is such good advice. I think people are often afraid to start and afraid to fail. Yep. This is a topic I probably talk about it on almost every single episode, but failure is a good thing. You learn from failure. You know,
it can be sad, but you learn from them.
Yeah, it hurts, it stings sometimes. You know, you wouldn't even know how many projects I have had declined this year, but yeah, you just keep on. Is all.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because there's a lot to learn in tech. And I would also say that you don't have to stick to like one specialty either.
That's very, very important to note. Very, very important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I agree.
Absolutely. I do web stuff, you know, but I recently started to write games. And the reason for that was because in my web experience, I did C# 100%. Unity is the platform that I'm using to write all my games, and that is C#. So they're related.
Yeah.
They're so okay, but the logic flow and all, it's very, very different to handle objects in an actual, like, you know, program outside of code. But it's so interesting. You don't have to stick to one thing. Everything's kind of related.
Connected somehow. Yeah. I completely agree with that. Like that's like something that's like a very important information everybody should know, because people start and they feel like, oh, switching will make them will almost feel like starting all over again, but not necessarily, because most of these things in tech have some sort of connection, or the information or the knowledge you have from this would be very beneficial in the other part that you decide to take. So +1 to what you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also I'll add, I haven't talked about this yet, and I just learned this recently. Unity, the platform has a Docker like plugin or whatever. So that's how people publish games. They use Docker and like Kubernetes and stuff. So I'm just like, oh my God. So it is all connected.
Yeah, I know.
Absolutely everything.
Cool. I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So I've extended our conversation as long as I could, because I didn't want to let you go, but it is time for us to wrap up. Before I let you go, can you tell everybody where to connect online with you.
Oh, sure. I'm mostly active on Twitter. So you can follow me on Twitter at Didicodes, Didicodes, and on LinkedIn, which is my full name, Didi Asikpo. It will be hard to spell, so just literally copy the name from the podcast and like search on LinkedIn.
Great, yeah. And I will have links to all of your stuff in the notes or description if you are watching it on YouTube. Didi, thank you so much. This was so fun.
Thank you so much for having me as well. Do have an amazing day.
If you want to support us, please like, subscribe, and share this episode with your fellow gems. Let me know in the comments what other topics you would like me to cover, and follow Tiaras and Tech on social media and use the hashtag MakeYourselfShine. Thanks for watching or listening, and have a great day.